Welcome back, guys, to Wrong Turn Horror. In today's episode, I'm sharing 10 terrifying Halloween stories from haunted houses. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new horror story. Also let us know from where you are watching and what time it is there, because tonight you're stepping into homes that don't let their visitors leave. It was Halloween night in 1997, the kind of cold where the air felt sharp enough to cut your breath in half. 12-year-old Danny Brewer tugged his plastic pirate sword at his side as he ran from house to house, the crunch of dead leaves following him down the street. His neighborhood in rural Illinois always went big for Halloween fake gravestones, glowing skeletons, and orange lights draped like spiderwebs across porches. The smell of burning pumpkin candles and damp soil lingered everywhere. It was the kind of night that made everything feel alive and haunted all at once. Danny's two friends, Tyler and Gabe, trailed behind him, complaining about how late it was. Their bags were nearly full of candy, and most of the houses had started turning off their porch lights. But Danny wasn't ready to stop. He'd always been the daring one, the kid who wanted to see how far he could push the Halloween thrill before something pushed back. That's when he noticed Itrivan's Hollow Lane, a narrow, fog-covered street at the edge of town. No one ever went trick-or-treating there. The grown-ups said the last house on that road had been empty for decades. "Come on," Danny said, pointing toward it. "Just one more house." Tyler frowned. "That place. My dad says people used to disappear up there." "Your dad says the mailman's a vampire," Danny laughed. "Let's just check it out. If it's empty, we'll go home." The three of them stepped into the mist. The air got colder, and the sound of crickets vanished. The houses along Raven's Hollow looked older, darker, as if the whole street had been abandoned by time itself. And at the very end stood the one Danny had heard about in whispers at school. The old grey Victorian house with a pointed roof and ivy crawling up the windows. It looked dead, but tonight there was a light in the window. A jack-o'-lantern, glowing faintly orange, its grin crooked and eyes cut too deep. The candle inside flickered like it was breathing. "Someone lives there now," Danny said quietly, almost convincing himself. He tightened his grip on his candy bucket and started up the walkway. Each step on the rotting boards groaned under his sneakers. The yard smelled like wet leaves and old smoke. When he reached the porch, he noticed something strange. There were no decorations, no pumpkins, not even a doormat, just that single carved pumpkin glowing from inside. He hesitated for a moment, then knocked. The door creaked open, slow and heavy, like it hadn't moved in years. Warm yellow light spilled out, and Danny could hear the faintest sound from inside a woman's voice humming an old tune. It sounded like a lullaby, trick or treat. Danny called softly. The humming stopped. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then a voice came from the darkness beyond the doorway. "What are you dressed as, dear?" Her tone was gentle, but wrong somehow, like the words were stretched through a smile that didn't quite fit the mouth. Danny stepped back, his heart pounding. "I'm a pirate," he said. "Oh," the voice said slowly. "We had a boy like you once." "Same costume?" Danny's throat went dry. He looked over his shoulder to see Tyler and Gabe at the edge of the yard, motioning for him to come back. But curiosity, or maybe greed, rooted his feet to the porch. He stepped closer to the doorway. Inside, he could see faint candlelight flickering along the walls. The house smelled of wax and something sweetly rotten, like fruit left too long in the sun. "Do you want some candy?" the voice asked. Danny nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "Yeah, then come in, dear. The treats are on the table." His hand trembled as he pushed the door open. The hinges screamed. Inside, the hallway was narrow and covered in peeling wallpaper. Every picture frame on the wall was turned backward, faces hidden against the plaster. The air was thick, like he'd stepped underwater. "Hello," he whispered. The humming returned, but this time it wasn't from one person, it was from many. Whispering voices began to fill the house, soft and childlike, overlapping one another in tones of laughter and crying. Danny backed toward the door, but it slammed shut with a force that rattled the glass in the windows. "Don't be rude," the woman's voice said again, closer now. "You came for candy, didn't you?" Something moved in the hallway. A shadow slid across the wall, thin and jerky, like someone walking wrong. Danny's eyes darted toward a small table near the door where a glass bowl sat, filled with wrapped candies. He grabbed a handful just to have something to hold, some proof that this was normal. The candy felt cold and sticky. When he looked down, he realized it wasn't candy at all. They were teeth, human teeth, clean and polished like they'd been collected. He screamed and dropped them, stumbling backward into the dark. The lights flickered, and for a moment he saw them, faces pressed into the walls, eyes staring, mouths open in silent screams. Small faces, children's faces. The wallpaper pulsed around them like skin. The woman's voice was behind him now, whispering in his ear. "You shouldn't have come in, dear. The others get jealous." Danny turned, and for the first time, he saw her. She was tall, too tall, her head bent to fit under the ceiling. Her skin was grey and wrinkled like wax melted and reformed. Her eyes were black hollows, and her mouth was filled with tiny, broken teeth, just like the ones he'd held in his hand. He ran. The hallway stretched longer than before, the front door shrinking away into darkness. The whispering grew louder, a chorus of children chanting his name. "Danny, Danny, stay." He crashed into a mirror at the end of the hall, shattering it. Glass sliced his arm, and for a second he saw not his reflection, but a dozen pale children staring back at him, faces grey and frozen. One of them lifted a hand and pointed toward him. The rest began to smile. Danny screamed again, twisting around in panic, but there was nowhere left to go. The woman's shadow rose behind him, stretching across the ceiling. "You can't leave without saying thank you," she hissed. The house shuddered. The jack-o'-lantern in the window flickered wildly, its grin splitting wider as the candlelight flared. Then everything went dark. The next morning, a mail carrier noticed something on the porch of the old house's small orange pumpkin bucket, half full of candy. Inside was a broken plastic pirate sword, cracked in half. No one ever found Danny Brewer. His friends swore they saw him step inside the house, but when police arrived, the building was empty. No furniture, no lights, no sign of life. Only the faint smell of rotting pumpkins and the faint echo of a child's laughter. When you walked past the porch at night, the house has been abandoned ever since. Though every Halloween, a single jack-o'-lantern appears in the window, flickering faintly until midnight. Some say it's a warning. Others say it's Danny, trying to find his way home. But if you ever walk by Raven's Hollow Lane on Halloween, don't knock. The house still answers the door. It was late October of 2009 when Lisa Moretti, a real estate agent from Salem, Massachusetts, got a call from her boss about one last showing before the Halloween weekend. She had already packed her things, ready to spend the evening with her friends at a costume party, but her boss insisted. "It's a big sale," he told her. "Just show the house, lock up, and go home. Easy commission." Lisa wasn't thrilled. She'd heard the stories about the property, an old farmhouse built in the 1880s, sitting alone at the edge of town. Locals said it was cursed. There were rumors about a family who'd vanished inside, leaving their dinner plates still on the table. Of course, she didn't believe that. She prided herself on being practical, logical, and above all, professional. Haunted houses didn't exist. Bad wiring and mold did. Still, as her car rolled up the long dirt road leading to the farmhouse, the doubt crept in. The sun was gone, leaving behind a thin band of blood-orange light on the horizon. The woods pressed in tight on both sides, the trees black and motionless. When she finally saw the house, it was like something pulled straight from a nightmare, 2 stories tall. Windows boarded up except for one, and the roof sagging slightly in the middle. A single porch light flickered weakly, just enough to see the peeling white paint and the swing that rocked in the wind without sound. Lisa parked the car, grabbed her clipboard, and stepped out into the cold. The smell hit her first damp earth and something else underneath it. Something metallic, faint but sharp, like rust or blood. She shook it off, straightened her blazer, and walked up the creaking porch steps. The key turned stiffly in the lock. "Hello," she called, forcing cheer into her voice. "It's Lisa from Salem Realty. Anyone here yet?" Silence. She checked her phone. No signal. Great dot inside. The air was heavy and cold, like stepping into a cellar. The wooden floors groaned with every step. Her flashlight beam swept across a narrow hallway lined with faded wallpaper and old family portraits. The faces yellowed, eyes staring straight into hers no matter where she moved. She made her way to the living room, calling out again for the clients who were supposed to meet her. The email had said a couple was already on their way and might even arrive before her. But the house was empty, except for the faint smell of something rotten drifting down from upstairs. Then came the sound, soft, rhythmic, from above her head. Footsteps. Lisa froze, staring at the ceiling. "Hello." The footsteps stopped. She swallowed hard. "If someone's up there, please announce yourself. This property is private until showing." Still nothing. Her flashlight trembled in her hand as she aimed it up the staircase. The wallpaper along the stairwell was peeling in long strips, revealing splintered wood beneath. Halfway up, she noticed small, wet footprints, bare feet, tiny. Like a child's, they glistened faintly under the beam of her light. Leading up toward the attic door, the air grew colder with each step. She could see her breath now, little clouds forming in the beam of light. When she reached the top landing, she noticed a door at the end of the hallway. Unlike the others, it was painted dark red, the paint cracked and uneven, as if someone had done it in a hurry. The email about the listing had mentioned 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. No attic, no red door. She called out again, her voice quieter now. "Is anyone up there?" "This isn't funny," a child's voice whispered from behind the door. "Don't go in the red room." Lisa's breath caught in her throat. "Who's there?" she said, trying to sound calm. Silence. Her hand shook as she reached for the doorknob. It was cold, so cold it burned her palm. She hesitated, but something inside her, the stubborn professionalism that refused to believe in ghosts, pushed her forward. The door creaked open. The smell hit her first, stronger now, thick and sweet. Inside, the room was dimly lit by a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. The floor was covered in dust and dirt. There was a small wooden chair in the corner, and something written on the wall in dark, uneven letters. "Welcome home." Her heart pounded. She took a step closer. That's when the light bulb flickered, and she saw it, handprints smeared across the walls, hundreds of them, some small like a child's, others larger, all pressed into the wall like they'd been burned there. The bulb went out. Lisa's flashlight flickered violently, then died. She was swallowed by the dark. Her breath came fast and shallow. She reached into her bag for her phone, desperate for even a small bit of light, but as soon as she turned on the screen, she froze. Reflected in the glass was the red room, but behind her stood someone, a tall figure, pale, motionless. She turned, and the light from her phone illuminated a woman standing inches away. Her eyes were hollow, her mouth twisted in an unnatural smile that stretched too far. Lisa screamed and stumbled backward. The phone fell and shattered on the floor. The woman's voice was soft and trembling, like an echo from somewhere deep underground. "We've been waiting for you, Lisa. How do you know my name?" Lisa gasped. The woman tilted her head. "You showed this house before. You forgot to leave." Her mouth opened wider, revealing rows of small teeth. Far too many. The room filled with the sound of children giggling, but Lisa couldn't see them. Only shadows, moving along the walls, running in circles around her. Tiny hands brushed her ankles. Something tugged at her blazer. She bolted for the hallway, slamming into the doorframe. It wouldn't open. The knob turned endlessly under her grip. Behind her, the whispering grew louder. Hundreds of voices now, crying, laughing, chanting her name. Then she felt it. A cold hand on her shoulder. She spun around, swinging the flashlight like a weapon, and saw the faces of the children. Dozens of them. Their skin was grey, their eyes completely white, and each had a jagged red line across their necks. They moved closer. They're whispering now, a single word repeated over and over. "Stay." Lisa screamed again and kicked the door open. She ran down the stairs, flashlight bouncing wildly, barely catching glimpses of movement in her periphery. Figures watching from the corners, hands reaching from the walls. She hit the front door and yanked it open, stumbling into the night air. The cold wind hit her face. The fog had rolled in thick, covering the yard like a white sea. She didn't stop running until she reached her car. Her hands shook as she jammed the key into the ignition. The engine sputtered to life. She looked up at the house one last time and her stomach dropped. There were lights on in every window now. Silhouettes of people stood in each one, tall and thin, motionless. Watching her, she drove off the property, tires spinning on the wet gravel. The further she got, the lighter the air felt, until the fog finally broke. She pulled over on the side of the road to catch her breath. Her hands were still trembling. She reached for her phone to call her boss, but when she looked down at it, her blood ran cold. The wallpaper on her phone screen wasn't the one she remembered setting. It was a picture, a dim photo taken from behind her, showing her standing inside the red room. She never made it home that night. The next morning, the police found her car on the side of the road, driver's door open, engines still running. No sign of struggle, but inside the farmhouse, they discovered new handprints on the walls, fresh ones, adult-sized, and a message scratched into the wood beneath the attic stairs. Welcome home. Lisa, to this day, the house on Ravenswood Farm remains abandoned. The realty company went bankrupt the following year, and the property vanished from official records. Locals say if you walk past it on Halloween night, you can still see the porch light flicker on, and if you listen closely, you'll hear a woman's voice calling softly from the attic, offering a tour that never ends. It was Halloween night, 2015, when Tom and Rachel Langford finally moved into their dream home in a quiet Oregon neighborhood. The street was lined with maple trees glowing orange under the streetlights, their leaves carpeting the road like fire. Every porch had pumpkins, flickering candles, and decorations, witches hanging from doorways, fake cobwebs stretched across fences. The neighborhood looked like it had been built for Halloween. Tom carried the last box inside and looked around proudly. The house smelled faintly of pine and old wood. It was a 2-story Victorian with stained glass windows and an attic that creaked whenever the wind picked up. They'd gotten it for cheap, too cheap, really. The realtor mentioned the previous owners had left in a hurry, but Tom and Rachel didn't care. They wanted a fresh start after years of apartment living. As the sun set, Rachel lit the candles in the jack-o'-lanterns she had carved that morning. The warm glow filled the porch as the first trick-or-treaters appeared, little ghosts, superheroes, and monsters laughing as they ran from door to door. Tom stood by the doorway handing out candy, smiling at the kids. By 10 p.m., the street had quieted. The laughter faded, and the night grew heavier. The fog rolled in from the forest behind the house, wrapping the street in white mist. The sound of an owl echoed somewhere far off. Tom closed the door, locked it, and turned to Rachel with a grin. "That's it," he said. "Our first Halloween here. Success?" Rachel smiled, sipping her wine. "It feels perfect, doesn't it?" They sat by the fireplace, talking about their plans for the house, painting, fixing the roof, maybe planting a garden in spring. But as the fire burned low, Rachel's expression shifted, her gaze fixed on something behind Tom. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Tom turned. Through the front window, half hidden behind the curtains, he saw 3 figures standing on the sidewalk. Trick-or-treaters, maybe, though they weren't moving. They just stood there, perfectly still, facing the house. Tom frowned. Probably some kids pulling a prank. But the longer he looked, the more wrong it felt. Their costumes weren't like the others he'd seen that night. One looked like a scarecrow, its head tilted unnaturally to the side. Another wore a long black dress and a pointed hat. A witch, but the hat was crushed, bent, and old. The last was the simplest. A ghost with a sheet draped over its head, 2 holes cut for eyes. Except the holes weren't where they should have been, too high, too wide apart. Tom stood up. "Stay here," he said. He opened the door. The cold air rushed in, stinging his face. The porch light flickered as he stepped outside. The figures didn't move. "Hey," he called, trying to sound friendly. "You guys okay? Trick-or-treating's over, but I've got candy if you want." No response. He took a step closer, and the fog thickened, curling round his legs. The figures blurred, then vanished completely. He looked left, right, nothing but mist. A chill crawled up his spine. "Weird," he muttered, heading back inside. But when he shut the door and turned around, Rachel was staring at the window again. Their back, she whispered. He froze. The three figures stood exactly where they had been, motionless. Tom's skin prickled. He turned off the porch light, hoping maybe they'd get the message and leave. The darkness outside swallowed them whole. For a few minutes, nothing happened. Then came a sound, faint but unmistakable. The front gate creaking open. Rachel clutched his arm. Tom. Footsteps on the porch. Slow, deliberate. Then a soft knock. He swallowed hard, walking to the door. "I'm calling the cops," Rachel hissed. "It's probably just kids," he said, though his voice shook. He peeked through the peephole. Empty porch. He opened the door. No one. Only the fog, swirling slowly under the porch light. When he turned back inside, the candy bowl on the hallway table was gone. "Did you move it?" he asked. Rachel shook her head, eyes wide. They searched the living room, kitchen, even the porch, nothing. The bowl had vanished. Trying to shake off the unease, they returned to the couch. The fire had nearly burned out, and the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to grow deeper, darker. Rachel poured another glass of wine, her hands trembling slightly. "I don't like this," she whispered. "It doesn't feel like a prank." Tom tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out flat. "Let's just go to bed. It's late." Upstairs, the floorboards creaked beneath their feet. The air felt heavier, like something unseen was pressing down on the house. Tom checked the locks again before turning off the lights, at around 3 a.m. Rachel woke up to a noise, the faint creak of footsteps downstairs. She nudged Tom awake. Someone's in the house. He grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand and crept down the stairs, heart pounding. The living room was dark, the dying embers of the fire casting. Faint red light across the floor. Then he saw it, the candy bowl. The one that had gone missing sat in front of the fireplace, empty, melted chocolate and sticky wrappers. Surrounded it. "Rachel," he whispered. "Come down here." She joined him, eyes wide. How did it? A sound cut her off. A long, slow scrape. They both turned toward the window. The curtains were drawn. But behind them, something moved, faint silhouettes shifting in the light of the street lamp. Tom's voice was barely a whisper. "It's them." The curtains fluttered, though the windows were closed. Then 3 shapes pressed against the glass. The outline of the scarecrow, the witch, and the ghost. But their faces were wrong. The glass distorted them into shapes that didn't make sense. Stretched mouths and hollow eyes. Tom grabbed the nearest object, a fireplace poker, and yanked open the curtains. Nothing, just the reflection of their own terrified faces. Rachel turned away, clutching her chest. "We have to leave, Tom." But before he could respond, the reflection in the window changed. It was still the living room. But now, behind them, 3 figures stood in the reflection. Motionless, silent. Tom spun around. The room was empty. When he looked back at the window, they were closer, almost touching the glass. Rachel screamed, pulling him toward the door. They stumbled outside into the fog, running barefoot down the street. The cold cut through them, but they didn't stop until they reached the next block, where porch lights still glowed. They pounded on a neighbor's door until a sleepy old man answered. "What's going on?" Tom tried to explain, his words tumbling over each other. When the neighbor finally followed them back to the house, the fog had lifted. Everything looked normal. The front door was closed, the windows calm. Inside the house was quiet, too quiet. The candy bowl was back on the hallway table, filled neatly to the brim. The old man frowned. "You kids drinkin'," he muttered, turning to leave. But when he opened the front door, he froze. 3 small sets of footprints led from the porch to the door, bare, wet, and ending right at the threshold. He stepped back, shaking his head. "Get some rest," he said softly, and left. Tom and Rachel barely slept that night. They moved out the next day, leaving most of their things behind. A few weeks later, a new couple moved in. They found a box in the attic labeled Langford. Inside were photos of Tom and Rachel, smiling, unpacking boxes, sitting by the fireplace. In every photo, through the reflection of the window behind them, the same 3 trick-or-treaters could be seen. Always watching, always closer. The new couple threw the box out, but every Halloween since, neighbors swear they see 3 small figures standing by the Langford house. A scarecrow, a witch, and a ghost staring silently at the windows. And if you pass by that street on a foggy Halloween night, you might notice that one of the jack-o'-lanterns on the porch never goes out. Some say it's just decoration. Others say it's the only light left, burning for the ones still inside, because no one who's ever lived there stays past October. Halloween night, 2017. A small Pennsylvania town known for its quiet autumns and endless fields of corn was preparing for its yearly haunted house event, the Mirror Room. It was built inside the old Whitaker Mansion, a 19th century estate that had been abandoned for decades until a group of locals decided to turn it into a Halloween attraction. The rumor was that the house had once belonged to a wealthy family who vanished without a trace in 1903. No one ever found their bodies. Over the years, people claimed to see reflections in the mansion's windows, people who weren't there. When the local event company reopened it for Halloween, the stories only made it more popular. Among the workers that year was Emma Cross, a 26-year-old stage designer who loved Halloween. She had a creative streak: fog machines, creepy mannequins, motion sensors. She knew how to make fear feel real. The mansion fascinated her. It was 3 stories tall, its walls lined with cracked mirrors and portraits whose eyes seemed to follow you as you walked by. But the room that stood out most was at the end of the 2nd floor hallway, a wide door with a rusted brass handle and a crooked sign nailed above it. The Mirror Room. Emma hadn't seen it when she first toured the house, but the manager, Doug, told her to stay out. "That room's already set up," he said with a grin. "You'll see it when the guests do." But the door intrigued her. It looked old, older than the rest of the house, warped and blackened around the edges, like it had been burned. The night before the haunted house opened, Emma stayed late to finish setting up the fog machine. Everyone else had gone home. The air smelled faintly of dust and rot. She walked the long upstairs hallway, flashlight flickering against the cracked wallpaper. That's when she noticed something. The door to the Mirror Room was open, just a few inches. Doug had locked it earlier. Emma hesitated, then pushed it open. Inside was nothing, just mirrors, dozens of them. They lined every wall. Tall mirrors, small mirrors, some shattered, some perfectly clean. Her flashlight beam multiplied infinitely, bouncing back and forth. The air inside was cold, and when she stepped forward, her reflection seemed to lag for a split second before catching up. She frowned and waved her hand. The reflection followed, but a half-second too late. Okay, she whispered. That's creepy. In the far corner, one mirror was different. Taller, older, framed in dark wood, carved with faces, dozens of them, twisted and screaming. The glass was fogged, but something behind it seemed to move, like a shadow shifting in the mist. Emma stepped closer. Her reflection wasn't clear. It looked warped, stretched, almost like she was underwater. Then the lights flickered, the air grew heavy, and she thought she heard whispering, faint voices echoing from somewhere inside the glass. She turned off the flashlight. The whispering grew louder. Emma. Her name. Her heart pounded. Who's there? No answer. Only her reflection. Smiling, but she wasn't. She stumbled back, slamming into another mirror. Her reflection shattered, or maybe it didn't, because the pieces fell. But she could still see her own face staring back at her in the shards. The door slammed shut behind her. Panic surged through her chest. She ran to the door and pulled, but it wouldn't budge. The mirrors began to hum, a low vibration that filled the room. The reflections weren't matching her anymore. They moved on their own, twisting their heads, mouths opening in silent screams. She hit the door again and again until it finally flew open. She bolted out, nearly tripping down the hall. The sound stopped the moment she crossed the threshold. When she looked back, the door was shut tight again. The next morning, Doug found her sitting in her car outside, pale and shaking. You okay? He asked. She lied, said she'd just been tired. But she couldn't shake what she'd seen, or the feeling that she'd brought. Something out of that room with her. Opening night arrived. The mansion was packed with thrill-seekers. The fog machines hissed, the lights dimmed, and screams filled the halls. Emma stayed near the entrance, helping guide guests through around midnight. She noticed a little girl wandering near the stairs, holding a small pumpkin bucket. Sweetie, are you lost? Emma asked gently. The girl didn't answer. She just pointed up the stairs, toward the mirror room. Emma's chest tightened. You're not supposed to go up there, she said, taking a step closer. But when she blinked, the girl was gone. Later that night, guests started complaining. Hey, that woman in the mirror room's freaky, one man laughed. You guys went all out this year. Emma frowned. What woman? The one inside the mirrors. You can see her in all of them. Long black hair, white dress. Looks real. Emma's blood ran cold. We don't have anyone in there. Doug overheard. Don't worry about it, he said quickly. Just part of the fun. But Emma wasn't so sure. She went upstairs. The hall was quiet now. No laughter, no footsteps. Just the creak of the old floorboards. The mirror room door was open again. Inside, it was darker than before. The mirrors reflected no light, only endless darkness. Hello. She called. Her voice echoed once, twice, and then came back distorted. Hello. She froze. The mirrors began to ripple, like water disturbed by a breeze. Then, slowly, her reflection stepped out of sync again, smiling, tilting its head. Stop it, she whispered. The reflection raised its hand and placed it against the inside of the glass. Emma felt something cold touch her cheek. She screamed and stumbled backward, knocking over a smaller mirror. It shattered, and she saw, just for a split second, the reflection trapped inside, pounding on the inside of the shards. Mouthing help me, she ran the next morning. When Doug came to open the attraction, The room was locked again. No one could find the key. Emma didn't show up for work. Her phone went straight to voicemail. At first, they assumed she'd quit. But when they checked the security cameras, they found something strange. The footage from the hallway outside the mirror room showed Emma entering around 1 a.m., the door closed behind her. She never came out. At 1:17 a.m., the lights flickered, and for one frame, just one, her reflection appeared in the glass of the camera lens. But she wasn't screaming. She was smiling. 2 years later, the haunted house shut down. Locals said too many workers had gone missing or refused to enter after dark. The mansion was boarded up again, left to rot. But last Halloween, a group of teenagers broke in to film a video for TikTok. They laughed, daring each other to open the old mirror room. The door creaked open easily, as if waiting for them. They found dozens of mirrors, all cracked and dusty except one. One stood clean and shining. When they looked into it, they saw a woman standing behind them, dressed in white. Her mouth stretched into an impossible grin. One of the boys turned round, flashlight shaking. No one was there. But when he turned back to the mirror, there were only 9 reflections. One of them was gone. And if you visit the Whitaker mansion today, you'll find that same mirror still there. Tall, old, framed in dark wood, carved with screaming faces. Sometimes, if you stand too close, you'll see someone standing behind you. A woman in white, smiling. And if she reaches out, don't run, because by then she's already inside the glass. It was Halloween night, 2018. A small town in rural Ohio was hosting its annual Halloween carnival. And as tradition went, it ended with a haunted house experience at the old Berkeley Manor, an estate that had stood empty since the late 1970s. The house loomed at the edge of the forest, its roof sagging, its windows boarded, but every October, thrill-seekers came to walk its halls. The organizer that year was a man named Eli Barrett, a retired carpenter and lifelong resident of the town. Eli had grown up hearing stories about the Berkeley family, about how they vanished one night in 1974, leaving dinner on the table and candles still burning. The police said it was a robbery gone wrong. The locals said otherwise. They said the house itself took them. This year, Eli wanted to outdo every haunted attraction in the county. He hired actors, installed motion sensors, and filled the halls with animatronic ghosts and sound effects. But there was one room he didn't touch, the basement. The door was locked from the inside, and no one had ever managed to open it. The previous year, someone had tried breaking in, and the door simply wouldn't budge. The townsfolk joked that Eli should leave it alone. That's where the Barclays still live, they said. Don't disturb the ones who stayed behind. Eli laughed it off, but there was something about that basement that made him uneasy. When he walked past it, the air turned colder, and the walls seemed to hum, like a faint vibration beneath the floorboards. On Halloween morning, Eli arrived early to do a final check. The actors were rehearsing, and the fog machines hissed in the corners. The smell of old wood and burning candles filled the air. Everything looked perfect, except for one thing. The basement door was open. Just slightly, he froze. Who did this? He called out, but no one answered. Slowly, he walked over. The hinges creaked when he pushed it open. Beyond it was a staircase descending into darkness. A cold draft rose from below, carrying the faint smell of damp earth and something else. Something metallic. He grabbed a flashlight and shined it down. The beam barely reached the bottom. Probably just the wind, he muttered. But deep down, he didn't believe it. He took one step down, then another. The wood groaned beneath his weight. About halfway down, he heard it. A faint whisper, like someone breathing just behind him. He spun around, but the doorway was empty. When he reached the bottom, the beam of light revealed stone walls slick with moisture. Old furniture, covered in sheets, stood like pale ghosts in the dark. A rusted chandelier hung crookedly from the ceiling. And then he saw it. A mirror, tall, cracked, covered in dust, leaning against the far wall. He wiped the surface with his sleeve, and his reflection appeared. But it wasn't quite right. His reflection was smiling, though he wasn't. He stepped back. The reflection tilted its head, the smile widening. The flashlight flickered, and in that flicker, Eli saw something standing behind his reflection. A woman in a nightgown, her eyes black and empty, her hands resting gently on his reflection's shoulders. The light went out completely. He stumbled backward, running up the stairs, 2 at a time. The basement door slammed shut behind him, shaking the frame. When the crew arrived, Eli didn't say a word about it. He just nailed the door shut and told everyone to stay away. By evening, the carnival crowd had gathered. The line for the haunted house stretched down the block. Laughter and nervous chatter filled the air. Inside, everything went according to plan. The actors screamed on cue. The sound effects worked perfectly, and the visitors left terrified but thrilled. But around midnight, a group of teens decided to take it a step further. They'd heard rumors about the basement, how it was the real haunted part of the house. So when the crowd thinned out, they slipped away from the group tour and made their way to the back hallway. The lights flickered as they approached the door. "There it is," one of them whispered. "Let's see what's inside." The nails had been pried loose, as if from the inside. The oldest boy, Ryan, pulled the door open and shined his phone's flashlight down. "Ladies first," he joked. No one laughed. The staircase looked ancient, crumbling in places, but curiosity got the best of them. They descended slowly, 1 step at a time, their breaths misting in the cold air at the bottom. The room looked just as Eli had seen it. Stone walls, old furniture, and that same mirror. "Creepy," one girl muttered, walking up to it. "You can't even see yourself clearly." She wiped the dust off the surface. "There," she said, and froze. Her reflection wasn't hers. It looked older. Her hair grey, her skin pale, her eyes hollow. The reflection reached out and placed a hand on the inside of the glass. "Guys," she whispered, backing away. But the others were already seeing it too, their reflections shifting, changing, grinning. The flashlight beams flickered, bouncing wildly across the walls as someone screamed. The mirror rippled like water. A hand, grey and bony, reached through the glass and grabbed Ryan's wrist. He shouted and tried to pull back, but the hand yanked harder. The glass didn't break, it stretched. The others screamed as the mirror swallowed him whole, his flashlight clattering to the ground. They ran, tripping over each other, scrambling up the stairs. When they reached the top, the door slammed shut and locked behind them. Outside, the carnival music played on. No one noticed the screams that followed. The next morning, Eli arrived to find the house empty. The lights were still on. The fog machine still hissed. And in the corner near the basement door, he found a single cracked phone, the screen glowing faintly. The last video recorded on it was only 12 seconds long. The camera faced the mirror. 5 reflections stared back, not moving, not blinking, their mouths open in silent terror. Then, one by one, they began to smile. Eli shut the place down for good that day. The town council boarded up Berkeley Manor, declaring it unsafe. But every Halloween, people still sneak in. Some swear they hear whispering from the basement. Others say they've seen their reflections smile before they do. And one family that lives nearby claims that on cold October nights, they can see a dim light shining from behind the boarded-up windows, flickering like candlelight dot if you ever pass by. Berkeley Manor on Halloween. Don't look in the windows. Don't look in the mirrors. Because the thing that smiles back might not be you anymore. They say mirrors are harmless, just glass and reflection. But in that house, on that night, the glass remembers. It remembers who it took, and is still waiting for more. Halloween night, 2019. A freezing fog rolled over the small town of Mill Creek, blanketing the streets in a white, ghostly haze. The leaves whispered through the wind, and the air smelled like burning pumpkins and wet earth. It was the kind of night where every shadow looked alive, and every sound made you turn your head just to be sure you were still alone. At the edge of town stood the Davenport House, a massive, decaying Victorian mansion that everyone knew but no one visited. It had been abandoned for almost 40 years, ever since the Davenport family mysteriously disappeared one Halloween night. The only thing left behind were their jack-o'-lanterns, still burning on the porch. When police arrived the next morning, that year, a group of friends, Liam, Katie, Marcus, and Becca, decided to film a Halloween documentary for their YouTube channel. They called it Real Haunts USA, though none of them had ever actually experienced anything real. But the Davenport house was different. The locals whispered about flickering lights in the upper windows and laughter echoing from inside for views and clicks. It was perfect. For survival, it was a mistake. They arrived just before midnight. The fog was thick enough to swallow their flashlights whole. The driveway was lined with rotting pumpkins, their carved faces collapsing inward. The gate was rusted shut, but Marcus kicked it open, his breath visible in the cold air. Katie filmed everything. "Okay, guys," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "This is the legendary Davenport house, where an entire family vanished on Halloween night. 1978. Locals say the house is cursed, that it takes anyone who steps inside after midnight." Liam chuckled, pretending not to be nervous. "Guess we're about to find out." They pushed open the front door. It groaned loudly, the hinges screaming like something alive. The inside smelled like mold and dust, the air so heavy it felt like walking underwater. The floorboards creaked with every step. Becca panned her flashlight across the living room. Old furniture sat where it had been left, a piano, a rocking chair, a cracked mirror above the fireplace. Everything coated in a thick layer of grey dust. But what made her pause was the jack-o'-lantern sitting on the mantelpiece. It was fresh, its grin was carved cleanly, and a candle flickered faintly inside it. "Who lit that?" Marcus whispered. "Probably squatters," Liam said quickly, though his voice wavered. They moved deeper into the house. The long hallway seemed endless, lined with family portraits whose faces had faded into smears. Every few steps, Something creaked upstairs, slow, steady footsteps pacing above them. Marcus laughed nervously. Maybe the Davenports are home. Katie lowered the camera. Not funny. They reached the kitchen. The table was still set, for plates, for glasses, silverware placed perfectly. Only the food was gone, leaving behind dark stains that might have been mold. Or something else. Becca pointed her flashlight toward the far wall. What's that? Scrawled across the wallpaper, written in something dark and dry, were the words, "Light them again." Before anyone could speak, a sound echoed through the house, the sharp click of a lighter, then the faint hiss of a candle catching flame. Marcus turned, flashlight shaking. Who's here? No answer. They followed the sound back to the living room. The jack-o'-lantern on the mantel now burned brighter. Becca's voice was barely a whisper. It wasn't that bright before. Katie raised her camera again. The viewfinder flickered, distorting the image, faces melting into static. When the picture cleared, her own reflection stared back at her from the mirror above the fireplace. But her reflection was smiling, and she wasn't. Guys. She breathed. Something's wrong. The lights on their cameras began to flicker. The air turned icy. Then the door slammed shut, shaking the walls. Liam ran to it, pulling at the handle. It's locked. They tried the windows next, nailed shut. Suddenly, music started playing from somewhere upstairs. Faint, distant piano notes, playing a slow, broken melody. That's the piano, Marcus whispered. No one's up there. They stood frozen, listening as the song grew louder. Then a voice, faint but clear, drifted down the staircase. Stay for dinner, Becca screamed. The sound of the piano stopped instantly. Liam grabbed her arm. We're leaving now. They moved as one toward the back of the house, their footsteps echoing through the hall. But as they passed the dining room, the candles on the table flared to life, one by one, 4 plates. 4 chairs dotted now, 4 places set with steaming food. Keep moving, Liam hissed, pulling Katie toward the door. But when they reached the kitchen, the door they'd entered from was gone. In its place stood another wall, old, yellowed wallpaper that hadn't been there minutes ago. They were trapped. The whispers began then, soft at first, like wind through leaves, then louder, overlapping. Stay. Stay with us. Marcus spun around, his flashlight shaking wildly. Stop. Just stop. The light landed on the hallway mirror. For a second, it showed their reflections, pale, terrified. Then the image changed. 4 figures stood behind them, the Davenports, the mother's head tilted unnaturally to the side, the father's eyes hollow and sunken, 2 children smiling with mouths that were far too wide. Their skin was grey, peeling, like wax melting off a candle. Run, Katie screamed. They bolted down the hall, turning corners blindly. The house seemed to shift, walls stretching, doors appearing where none had been. The air smelled like rot and smoke. Becca tripped, her camera clattering to the ground. When Liam turned to help, she was gone, no scream, no sound. Just gone. Marcus grabbed the camera. Where'd she go? The lens showed static, then a flicker of Becca's face, pale eyes, wide, a hand over her mouth as something dragged her backward into the dark. They didn't look back. Finally, they burst into the living room again, or what was left of it. The walls were blackened, burned, and the jack-o'-lanterns had multiplied. Dozens of them now, all around the room, their carved faces sneering and grinning, flames dancing inside. The mirror above the fireplace began to crack. From inside it, the reflection of the Davenport family smiled wider. Then, one by one, the candles inside the pumpkins went out. Liam turned to Katie. The words on the wall. Light them again. What if it's the only way out? Her hands shook as she pulled a lighter from her bag. One by one, she relit the candles. Each flame seemed to make the house groan, the walls trembling. When she lit the last one, the mirror shattered completely. The blast of cold air blew through the room, and suddenly silence. The house was still. The door creaked open by itself, revealing the fog outside. They didn't wait. They ran until they reached the car. Marcus started the engine, hands shaking so badly he dropped the keys twice. They sped away, not looking back. It wasn't until they were halfway down the road that they realized Katie wasn't with them. Liam's voice broke. She was right behind me. They turned round. Through the fog, the Davenport house stood silent, dark, except for one window on the second floor. A faint light flickered there. The next morning, police searched the house. They found no sign of Katie, Becca, or anyone else. But on the mantel, above the fireplace, sat a new jack-o'-lantern, freshly carved. Its grin was unmistakable. It was Katie's face, and inside, the candle burned all by itself, the flame never dying to this day. The locals say the Davenport house still lights up every Halloween night, each new candle burning for the ones it takes. If you listen closely near midnight, you can hear laughter echoing from inside, followed by the faint click of a lighter, and a voice whispering, "Light them again." It was the night before Halloween, and the streets of Hollow Creek were already alive with decorations grinning pumpkins. Plastic skeletons swaying in the chilly wind, and orange lights flickering along the porches. But at the far edge of town, past the streetlights and into the fog-covered back roads, stood a house no one dared to decorate the abandoned Granger mansion. For decades, the townspeople whispered that something evil lingered inside. Some said it was cursed, others claimed to see flickering candlelight in the windows when no one lived there. But tonight, curiosity had its victims. For high school seniors, Jared, Mia, Lucas, and Becca decided they'd film a Halloween Dare video. They wanted to break into the Granger place, explore every room, and post it online for their followers. They joked about ghosts, betting $20 on who would stay inside the longest. The air was cold, the sky bruised purple with storm clouds, and their laughter echoed unnaturally through the trees as they approached the property. The house looked like something out of a nightmare. Its roof sagged, the porch was eaten away by rot, and every window seemed to hold a reflection of movement. The front door was chained, but Lucas had brought bolt cutters. He grinned, saying, "Nothing's stopping us now." When the chain snapped, the sound rang out like a scream in the dark. Inside, the air smelled like mold and wet ashes. The floors creaked under every step. The wallpaper peeled off in curled tongues, and their flashlights danced across walls covered in old family portraits, faces blurred with decay. Mia, the one filming, whispered, "Guys, I don't think we should be here." But Jared, always the bravest, laughed it off. "Come on, it's Halloween. What's the worst that could happen?" They wandered deeper, passing a long hallway filled with mirrors, dusty, cracked, and warped with age. As they moved past, Becca swore she saw a shadow standing behind them, tall and crooked. She turned instantly, but the hallway was empty. Lucas joked to calm her nerves, but his own hand was trembling. The deeper they went, the colder it got. Their breaths turned white, and their flashlights flickered as if the house itself was swallowing the light. They found the staircase leading down to the basement, narrow descent swallowed by pitch black. "No way," Mia whispered, backing away. But Jared, trying to prove himself, smirked. "I'm going down. Keep the camera on me." The wooden steps groaned under his weight, each creak echoing in the hollow silence. When he reached the bottom, he shone his light around. The basement was cluttered with old furniture, cobwebs, and boxes covered in black dust. Then he saw an old wooden table in the center, and on it a single object, a porcelain mask, painted white with black tears streaming from the eyes. "Yo, check this out," Jared called, holding it up. The camera zoomed in, catching every eerie detail. "Creepy, right?" He placed it over his face, laughing, but the moment he did, his body went still. The laughter stopped. The others called down to him. No answer. Lucas rushed down, his flashlight shaking in his hand. "Jared," he called, but the boy stood motionless, facing the far wall. Lucas reached out and touched his shoulder. Jared turned slowly. The mask's painted eyes were now bleeding real black tears. Jared's voice came out wrong, like it wasn't his own. "It sees you now," he said. Lucas stumbled back, screaming for the others to run. But upstairs, the hallway had changed. The mirrors were no longer reflecting them, they showed something else. The group saw themselves in the mirrors, standing in the same hallway. But behind their reflections stood dozens of figures wearing identical porcelain masks. Faces turned toward them, heads twitching in unison. Mia dropped the camera and bolted toward the exit, only to find the front door bricked shut from the inside. Becca pounded her fists against the wood until her knuckles bled, crying, "This isn't real. This can't be real." Behind them, Jared's slow footsteps echoed closer, steady and deliberate. When he finally stepped into the hallway, the others gasped. His face was gone. Only the mask remained, fused to his skin. Lucas swung a broken chair leg at him, shouting, but Jared didn't flinch. Instead, he whispered, "It wants new faces." Then, without warning, the other masks in the mirrors began cracking. Each crack echoed like thunder, and then the glass exploded outward, shards flying, slicing through the air. From the broken mirrors stepped the masked figures, one by one, dragging their feet across the creaking floor. The teens ran into a room at the end of the hall and slammed the door shut. The sound of dragging footsteps grew louder, closer. Becca was sobbing uncontrollably. Lucas was hyperventilating. And Mia pressed her phone to her chest, whispering, "We have to find a way out." She checked her footage on the screen. She saw something horrifying. The camera showed them sitting in the same room, but in the reflection of the window behind them, there were masks on their faces. Then the knocking started. Slow, rhythmic knocks against the wooden door. "Let us in," a voice whispered, low and childlike. "You've already joined us." The handle began to turn on its own. Lucas grabbed Mia's hand, pulled her toward the window, and smashed it open. Cold night air flooded in, and they climbed out, falling onto the overgrown grass below. They ran until their lungs burned, until the mansion was just a silhouette swallowed by fog. When they finally reached the road, panting and shaking, Becca looked back and saw someone standing in the top window. It was Jared, watching them. The mask gleamed white even from that distance. The police later investigated, but the house was empty. No sign of Jared, no sign of the other's footage, only Mia's cracked phone lying on the front steps, still recording. The final seconds of the video showed a reflection of the group running, except, in the reflection, none of them had faces. Months later, on Halloween night, a new video appeared on Mia's old channel. It was titled The Granger Dare Uncut Footage. It showed the full exploration from start to finish, but the end was different. In the last shot, all 4 teens were standing in the hallway, smiling beneath porcelain masks. The description under the video read, "Come visit us this Halloween. The house still wants more faces." The video was removed within hours, but some people claim they still see it pop up on random Halloween nights. Always the same grainy footage, always the same masks. And if you pause the video just before it ends, you might notice one more figure standing behind them, someone new, someone watching through the camera lens. Some say that if you watch long enough, the mask from the video will appear in your own reflection. And once you see it, it never goes away, because the Granger house doesn't just want to be remembered. It wants to be seen. It was Halloween night in the small town of Black Hollow, the kind of place that looked like it was made for spooky legends. Jack-o'-lanterns flickered on every porch. The scent of burning leaves filled the cold air, and a thick fog rolled down from the hills like a living thing. Children ran through the streets in costumes, vampires, witches, clowns, all laughing, unaware that something darker was lurking nearby. At the very edge of town stood an old Victorian house, known to locals as the widow's home. No one had lived there for 50 years, not since the night Eliza Harrow vanished inside. Some said she was a witch who cursed her husband and burned the house down around herself. Others whispered that her spirit still lingered, waiting for visitors on Halloween night. That's exactly why 3 Smithson, Riley, and Kayla decided to spend the night there. They were seniors who wanted something bigger than a costume party or trip. Mason brought his camera for a live stream. Riley carried a flashlight and a crowbar just in case. Kayla, the quiet one, didn't want to go but couldn't let her friends face it alone. They reached the gate just after 11 p.m. The air was still, too still, and the fog seemed to thicken around them the closer they got. "Come on," Mason said, laughing nervously. "Let's make this go viral. Exploring the haunted widow's home on Halloween has a nice ring to it, right?" They climbed the iron fence and walked up the crumbling path. The porch groaned under their weight, the door slightly ajar, as if it had been waiting for them. Inside, everything was covered in dust and cobwebs. The wallpaper had peeled off, revealing wooden walls darkened by smoke. The faint smell of something sweet lingered in the air like burnt sugar. They started filming, exploring each room. Mason narrated dramatically for his viewers. This is where the widow was last seen alive. They say her spirit never left. Let's find out. But as the minutes passed, the mood shifted. The temperature dropped sharply, and their breaths turned visible in the parlor. They found a large mirror leaning against the wall. The glass was cracked down the middle, yet their reflections appeared strangely clear. "Creepy," Riley muttered, tapping it with his flashlight. The moment his hand touched the frame, the mirror vibrated faintly, like something had stirred inside. They laughed it off, but none of them noticed that as they walked away, their reflections didn't move at the same time. They kept exploring, finding burnt furniture, old photographs of a pale woman with dark eyes, and a melted candle on the mantel. On the back of one photo was written, "She waits in the glass." Kayla frowned and whispered, "Maybe we shouldn't mess with this. It feels wrong." But Mason only grinned. "That's the point, Kayla. People love this kind of creepy stuff." In the dining room, they found something even stranger, a table set with 3 cracked teacups filled with blackened liquid. "Looks like she's expecting company," Riley joked. But his laugh caught in his throat when one of the cups began to tremble. The others watched as the liquid inside started to ripple, forming rings, even though the room was perfectly still. Then they heard a faint hum, a woman's voice singing an old lullaby from somewhere upstairs. It was soft and slow, echoing down through the walls. Kayla froze. "Did you hear that?" She whispered. "Yeah," Mason said, smiling nervously at the camera. "This is insane. Keep rolling." They crept up the staircase, every step groaning under their weight. The air grew colder. When they reached the landing, the singing stopped. There was only silence and the sound of the house breathing. Then they saw her standing at the end of the hall, half hidden in shadow. A woman in a black dress, her head slightly tilted. Her hair hung down like wet strands of thread, and her face was too pale to be real. "Hello," Mason called, his voice shaking. No answer. He stepped forward with the camera raised. But when he blinked, she was gone. In her place, the door at the end of the hall swung open by itself. A faint flicker of candlelight danced inside. They entered slowly. The room was filled with broken mirrors, some hanging on walls, others shattered across the floor. Candles burned at random, their flames unnaturally still. In the largest mirror, they saw themselves standing side by side, but there was someone else with them. The reflection showed a 4th person, a woman standing behind Mason, her face hidden beneath a black veil. Riley turned instantly, but no one was there. The camera flickered, distorting the image. Mason breathed heavily, muttering, "This is just a trick of the light." But when he looked again, his reflection had changed. It was still him, but smiling, wide and wrong, with eyes that looked hollow. "Mason," Kayla whispered, stepping back, "we need to leave." He didn't respond. His camera slipped from his hands and hit the floor, the feed still running. The last thing the lens caught before it cracked was Mason's reflection stepping out of the mirror, leaving the real Mason standing motionless, his mouth open in silent terror. Riley screamed and ran, grabbing Kayla's arm. They tore down the hallway, but the stairs were gone. In their place was a solid wall. Every direction they turned led to another mirror, another reflection staring back, but in each one, they looked slightly different, older, paler, smiling when they weren't. Kayla started crying, pounding her fists against the walls. "Please, let us out," she screamed. A soft voice whispered back, gentle and cold, "Stay for tea." Then everything went dark. The next morning, police found Mason's camera on the ground outside the widow's home, still recording. The video showed 3 figures entering the house, but none coming out. The final frame was a close-up of the cracked mirror, where 3 faint silhouettes stood inside, smiling, motionless, their faces pale as porcelain. A month later, a real estate agent placed the widow's home for sale. A couple looking to move into Black Hollow toured it, unaware of the legend. The wife stopped in front of a large mirror in the hallway and smiled. "It's beautiful," she said, brushing dust from the frame as she turned to leave. Her reflection stayed behind a moment too long, watching. Then it smiled wider, showing teeth that weren't hers. Because in the widow's home, every mirror still remembers the ones who entered, and every Halloween it waits for new faces to fill the glass. After all, Eliza Harrow never left. She just found company. It was Halloween night in the quiet rural town of Ashwood, and the air was colder than usual to cold, even for late October. A heavy mist hung over the fields, swallowing the moonlight, and the streets were eerily empty. Most families had already turned off their porch lights, their jack-o'-lanterns flickering dimly as the wind hissed through the trees. But at the far end of Hollow Bridge Road stood a house that still burned. Brighter, large farmhouse surrounded by dying cornfields. That was the Miller place. For years, no one went near it. Not after what happened to the Millers in the 1970s, the father gone mad, the mother found hanging from the rafters, and their son Danny vanished without a trace. Some said he ran into the cornfields that night and never came back. Others said something took him. But every Halloween, people claimed to hear a child's laughter coming from the direction of that house. That's what brought 4 friends there that night, Ben. Chloe, Ethan, and Marissa. They were seniors from the nearby high school, looking for something exciting to do on Halloween. Ben had heard the legend of Danny Miller his whole life and thought it would make the perfect Halloween dare. Spend an hour inside the Miller house after midnight, and I'll pay you $50. They laughed, thinking it was harmless fun. By the time they arrived, fog had swallowed the road. The old Miller house loomed out of it like a corpse, its windows dark, its roof sagging, its front door hanging half open. The cornfields around it were dead and dry, their brittle stalks whispering as the wind blew through them. Man, this place gives me chills, Chloe muttered, hugging her jacket. Ben grinned. That's the point. They stepped inside. The smell hit them first try, mold, and something metallic underneath it. The floorboards creaked beneath their feet, and the air felt thick, like the house was breathing around them. They turned on their flashlights, beams cutting through the dust. Old furniture was scattered everywhere, and children's drawings crude. Scratched in black, crayon covered one wall. Who's that supposed to be? Marissa whispered, shining her light on a drawing of a stick figure with a black hole for a face. Danny, Ethan said quietly. The kid who disappeared. The deeper they went, the colder it got. Their flashlights flickered, and the faint sound of something tapping echoed from upstairs. Ben chuckled nervously. Guess the ghost wants to say hi. They climbed the staircase, the air growing heavier with each step. At the top, they found a hallway lined with doors. The tapping grew louder, faster. It was coming from the last door at the end, when Ben pushed it open. The room was almost empty, except for a small rocking horse sitting in the center. It moved back and forth, slow and steady, though no one was near it. Chloe gasped. No way. Ethan walked closer, bending down to stop it. As soon as his hand touched the wooden frame, the house went silent. Then a soft giggle echoed behind them. They all froze. Who's there? Ben called, spinning around. A child's voice answered, barely above a whisper. You found my toy. The door slammed shut. The lights went out. In the pitch black, the only sound was the slow creak of the rocking horse moving again, back and forth, back and forth. Chloe screamed, fumbling for her phone's flashlight, and when the beam flickered on, she saw something standing in the corner, a small figure, about the size of a child, with pale skin and hollow black eyes. It was smiling. Ethan grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the door, but it wouldn't open. The knob twisted violently on its own, and then something whispered in his ear, close enough for him to feel the cold breath. "Stay and play." The figure moved fast, crawling across the floor on all fours. Ethan kicked it away, and the group bolted toward the window, shattering the glass and climbing out onto the slanted roof. Below them, the cornfields rustled violently, like something large was moving through them. Ben shouted, "Go!" "Jump!" They slid down and dropped into the dirt, running toward the road. But halfway through the field, Marissa stopped. "Where's Chloe?" she yelled. Ben turned around. Dan saw Chloe standing still between the rows of corn, her flashlight trembling in her hand. "Chloe, come on," he shouted. She didn't move. Her light flickered, then went out. They ran back, searching for her, their breaths visible in the cold. The fog was so thick they could barely see 2 feet ahead. Then they heard the same giggle from before, followed by the soft creaking of a rocking horse. Though they were far from the house, when Ben turned, he saw her. Chloe was standing right behind him, smiling, but her eyes were pitch black. "He wants to play," she whispered. Her body jerked forward unnaturally, and the fog swallowed her whole. Ben screamed her name, but Ethan pulled him away. "We have to go." They ran until they reached the road. When they looked back, the cornfield was perfectly still again. No fog, no movement, just silence. The police searched for Chloe for weeks. They found no trace of her, no footprints, no phone, nothing. The others refused to talk about what happened, except for Ben, who became obsessed. He started visiting the Miller house every night, sitting in the field, listening. On the anniversary of that Halloween, Ethan and Marissa got a call from Ben's mother. He hadn't come home in 2 days. They found his car parked outside the Miller property, the headlights still on. When the sheriff searched the house, he found Ben sitting in the upstairs room on the rocking horse, smiling. His eyes were black. He didn't speak, didn't move. The only sound was the steady creak of the horse moving back and forth. On the wall behind him, in black crayon, someone had written, "One more friend to play with." The sheriff closed the case as unexplained, but that didn't stop the stories. Every Halloween since, someone disappears near the Miller property. Locals claim they see a small child standing in the fog, waving, asking if you want to play. And sometimes, if you walk close enough to the cornfields, you'll hear the soft sound of a rocking horse, creaking in the dark. If you ever find yourself in Ashwood on Halloween night, don't stop near the Miller house. Don't look toward the fields. And whatever you do, don't follow the sound of laughter, because Danny Miller is still there, and he's always looking for new friends. It was the night of October 31st in the small town of Crowhaven, a place where Halloween wasn't just a holiday, it was a tradition soaked in fear. Every year, the locals held a massive costume parade downtown, followed by parties that lasted until dawn. But beyond the laughter and glowing pumpkins, there was an unspoken rule whispered among old-timers. Don't go near Hollow's End after midnight. They said the veil between the living and the dead was thinnest there, and those who trespassed didn't always come back. That Halloween night, 5 friends, Liam, Grace, Derek, Anna, and Noah decided to break that rule. They'd grown up hearing the stories, but never believed them. Hollow's End was just an abandoned stretch of forest on the outskirts of town, known for its decaying cabin and fog that never lifted. "It's all superstition," Derek said, as they stood at the edge of the woods, their breath visible in the freezing air. "We'll go in, take some pictures, and prove it's all fake." Grace hesitated. "My grandma said people disappeared here." "Yeah," Anna laughed nervously, "and my grandma says garlic keeps away vampires." They pushed forward, flashlights slicing through the dense fog. The forest was eerily silent. No wind, no insects, just the crunch of dead leaves underfoot. The deeper they went, the thicker the fog grew, until even the moonlight vanished. That's when they saw it, a faint light flickering ahead. They followed it until they reached a clearing. In the center stood an old wooden cabin, its windows boarded up, its roof caved in. But the light inside was real, a dim orange glow spilling through the cracks. "Someone's in there," Noah whispered. The door creaked open before they could knock. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of damp wood and burnt wax. Candles lined the floor, and strange symbols were carved into the walls, circles, crosses, runes none of them recognized. On a dusty table sat a row of jack-o'-lanterns, each carved with different faces, screaming, laughing, crying, and each candle flickered like it was breathing. "Okay," Derek muttered. "This is creepy as hell." Liam raised his phone to record. "We'll just grab some footage and leave." As they moved deeper into the cabin, the door slammed shut behind them. Grace screamed. Noah ran back to pull it open, but it wouldn't budge. The air grew colder, their breath forming thick clouds. Then, slowly, one of the jack-o'-lanterns turned on its own, the carved eyes locking onto them. The candle inside flared, glowing blood red. "Did you see that?" Anna gasped. "Probably the wind," Derek said, though his voice trembled. The light flickered again. One by one, the jack-o'-lanterns began turning. Toward them, their carved mouths twitching into wider, crueler smiles. The sound of faint laughter echoed from the walls, childlike, but wrong, distorted, as if coming from somewhere too deep to be human. Grace's flashlight caught movement in the corner. A figure stood there, tall, cloaked in shadow, its face hidden behind a pumpkin mask. Its voice was low and hoarse. "You came to Hollow's End." On this night, the friends froze. Liam lifted his phone, but the screen glitched, showing static and distorted faces that weren't theirs. The figure took a step forward, the floorboards groaning. "You shouldn't have come." "Look, we didn't mean to," Grace began, but the candles suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed the cabin. In that pitch black, they heard footsteps circling them, fast, then whispers, soft and urgent, echoing from every direction. Words they couldn't understand, spoken in a language that felt older than time. The air grew heavy, thick with something foul. Anna grabbed Liam's arm. "We need to get out of here, now." A deep voice answered from the dark. "You can't leave." The floorboards cracked beneath their feet, splitting open like rotten wood. A foul stench rose up from below. They stumbled backward, but Noah wasn't fast enough. His foot went through the floor, and something grabbed him from underneath. He screamed as hands cold, pale, and clawed pulled him down into the dark. Liam lunged forward, grabbing Noah's arm, but it was too late. The floor sealed back up like nothing had happened. "Oh my God," Grace sobbed, backing away. "We have to get out." The door suddenly burst open on its own, revealing the forest outside, but it wasn't the same. The fog was thicker, swirling like smoke. Shapes moved within it, too tall and too thin to be human. The group ran, crashing through the trees, branches tearing at their skin. Behind them, the laughter followed, high-pitched and endless. They didn't stop until they reached the edge of the forest. When they looked back, the cabin was gone. Only the fog remained. They staggered back into town, breathless and bleeding, trying to explain what had happened. The police searched Hollow's End the next day, but found nothing. No cabin, no candles. No Noah, just a field of pumpkins where the forest should have been hundreds of them. Stretching for miles, one pumpkin sat apart from the rest. Its face was carved with wide, terrified eyes and a mouth frozen in a silent scream. The candle inside burned with a strange blue flame, and carved into its stem were the initials NM. After that night, Hollow's End was fenced off by the town, declared unsafe for visitors. But people still hear the laughter on Halloween coming from the woods, soft and distant, like children playing in the dark. And every year, a new pumpkin appears in the field, each one bearing a name. Grace, Derek, and Anna stopped talking to each other after that night. They moved away, tried to forget. But 10 years later, on Halloween night, each of them received a package with no return address. Inside was a small pumpkin candle, its wax still warm, and a note that read, "You left one behind." Grace never lit hers. Anna threw hers away. Derek, drunk and bitter, lit his just before midnight. His neighbors said they saw a strange orange glow flickering in his windows all night long. And when they went to check the next morning, his house was empty. Only the candle remained, still burning, because, in Crowhaven, Halloween never ends, and Hollow's End always takes what it's owed.